Animals, people, and the planet are suffering. Hashtag me too. My name is Sylvia Milton. I am a mental health specialist and clinician, and I've worked with people suffering for the last 40 years. What I'd like to talk about today is Let's Get Britain Listening, and I'd like I'd like to start by telling you 3 short stories. The names of the people, I have an assistant over here, by the way, because I'm not very good at technology. So back one, the names of the 3 stories is Tom, Dick, and Harry. Okay, I didn't do this technology, I can assure you. Let me tell you the stories. Tom, Dick, and Harry is not the person's real name, but it could have been anybody. So let me start with the story of Tom. So just recently, Tom went into a shop to ask if they sold wallets. And while he was in that shop, he collapsed twice. The assistant went over and helped him and asked him if he had a condition, and he said that he had multiple sclerosis. He also said that he had bipolar illness, that he was 27 years old, unemployed, and lived alone. The assistant noticed that he had a bandage round his wrist and asked him what he'd done to his wrist. And he said, "I cut my wrist yesterday." She asked him, did he cut himself anywhere else? And he said, "I cut my neck." At which point, with his permission, she asked if she could remove his scarf, and she saw his blood was pumping. She called an ambulance. The ambulance came along, and obviously the ambulance took him off. We hope that he was well. I believe that that assistant saved his life that day, but we won't know what happened to him. So this is Tom. Dick is another story, okay? I used to have my own radio phone in the middle of the night on LBC radio. So quite a lot of listeners there in London. And what happened was it was the night before Christmas Eve, and I was coming off air at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had 2 minutes to go. So the producer decided I could take one more call. So Dick rang in and he said, "I want to shoot people." And so I said to him, "Okay, is there anybody in particular you want to shoot?" And he said, "My family." So I said, "Okay, well," I said, "Dick, the thing is that, we've got 2 minutes. Obviously, you need more time. So I'm going to call you off air." I walked from the studio to the control room, and my producer said the police have been listening to the call, they're on their way in. So I said, "Okay, that's fine, I'm going to go and talk to him." So while I was talking to him, I had my head down, I was on the phone, I noticed these 4 black shoes, and I looked up, and it was 2 police officers, and they were mouthing, "Get his address." So what happened was, on the spur of the moment, as I was talking to him, he's very distraught. This is off air now, but he's very distraught. I said to him, "Would it help if I came over and talked to you?" And he agreed. So I put the phone down, I had the address. The police decided they would take me with blue lights flashing from West London studio over to South East London where he lived. So we went all the way over the other side of London, and when we got outside his flat, there were armed police everywhere, 2 ambulances. It was very scary. And then 2 police officers came up and they said, "We've managed to gain entry to his flat, but he's asking to speak to you." So I went in, there's police everywhere, and I said to them, "Look, has he got a gun?" And they said no. So I said, "Okay, do you mind if I talk to him on his own in his sitting room?" If they would mind waiting outside the door. They were obviously very nervous about this, but I explained to them that I did feel confident and competent. So I discussed and listened to what he was saying, and he was completely distraught. He was distraught. He was mentally distressed. He was not mentally ill. So what happened was I then said to the police, can you take us to the local A&E department at the hospital, because what I would like to do is get the duty psychiatrist to come and talk to him and help him. They did that. We went in, I waited with him. As it happened, as luck had it, thank you, I knew the duty psychiatrist, so that was just really, it was like a seamless helping thing. I was then taken home by the police. He was kept in the hospital overnight. I rang Dick the next morning. He was much calmed down, and he said, I didn't know there was any help out there. I am so grateful. I'm so pleased that I rang the radio station. The hospital have assured me if I ever feel like this again, to come into A&E, I can see the duty psychiatrist. The third story is Harry. I was invited to go and do some training of call centre staff in a debt collection department of a very well-known bank, who should be nameless. And the reason that I was invited was because people, when they're in debt, obviously can have mental health problems. They might be in debt because they've got mental health problems. They might have mental health problems because they're in debt. But the bottom line is the call centre operators were getting extremely depressed and unhappy because people were ringing in and they were saying that they felt suicidal. They didn't know how to deal with their debt. Harry was £100,000 in debt with his mortgage. He had phoned the call centre and told them how upset he was. They did their best, but Harry was highly suicidal. He went home, he bought a gallon of petrol, he came back to the car park of the company, poured it over himself and set fire to himself. Obviously, he died. Aside from the fact of what happened to Harry, if you can think about this person's family, if you can think about all the call centre staff, nobody wanted to take a call at all then. Assistant, please, next slide. So what I want to ask you is, what is the common thread amongst those three calls, and why am I telling you such distressing circumstances? And the reason is because the common thread thank you. The common thread is they were all people in need, number one. They were also all people who were highly despairing. And in their high despair, make no mistake, these people had spoken to people. They had told people, I'm not coping. I don't know what to do. They had approached people. So that is the common thread, is that they're all people in need, all very, very desperate, and they all sought help. When you think about what I've said to you really publicly, so they were really desperate. Next slide, please. What are the consequences of that level of despair? Well, number one, it's either that you're living a life or you're existing. All of those people had gone from living to existing. This meant that they dragged themselves out of bed every day. They tried to talk to people. They felt there was no one there. They could not get the help that they need. So another consequence of that is if you're existing in your life and not living, it's a miserable life at best. At worst, people may die. Okay? So there are people, especially, I hate to say this, but I am going to say it because it irritates me, quite frankly. There are people in the world of personal development who tell me it's their choice. They should just get up and choose happiness. That'd be great. I would love it if those people who say that could show those people who are that desperate. And remember, it didn't happen overnight, okay? I would love it if they could choose happiness, but it doesn't work like that. So it isn't just their choice. And I guess the other thing one has to wonder is, why should we care? I mean, it's their life. In a sense, there is a choice that they've made, but it's not a free choice, okay? So why should we care, okay? Well, I'm saying, first of all, those people who are that unwell or on the route to that poor health, they can't choose happiness. I mean, they can choose happiness, but happiness is not going to come within them just by choosing it. Why should we care? Because we all, in my humble opinion, we all have a duty of care to each other, to be empathic, to understand what it's like. I know that I'm standing up here, I'm not totally 100%, without nerves, and that has been true of other people. So when we see people, we go, oh, I know what that feels like, and empathy is a good thing. And we need to be compassionate. Again, why? Because if we're not empathic to these people, if we're not compassionate to these people, God help the rest of us, because they're in such a bad way. What's the solution? Well, at the moment, I do watch quite a bit of television, a lot more than it seems to what other people seem to watch. And when I'm watching television at the moment, there are many different well-intended and actually really helpful to some people initiatives like Heads Together and All Minds Matter. And what those people are asking is, they're saying, there is such poor mental health. There are so many people suffering from mental health and mental illness problems at the moment. They're asking, let's get Britain talking. And I'm sitting there on my sofa with my cat, and I'm going, oh my God. And the reason I'm going, oh my God, is because people with mental health problems do talk. They do talk. They go to the doctor. They come to people like me. They try to go to psychiatrists. Often they don't want to talk to their family or friends because they don't want to contaminate their family or friends with their unhappy and distraught feelings. So what I'm saying is, yes, let's get Britain talking. Let's invite people to talk, but there's a problem. Because what we need to do first, this is an idea worth sharing. It definitely is. I hope that you all would agree. Is we need to have somebody for them to talk to. And what I believe we need is an army of trained listeners. See, because I'm very old now, in the past 40 years, I've trained literally in businesses, in organisation, thousands of people to be really good, really effective listeners. I'm not the only person who's done it. I haven't trained these people to be trained counsellors. One, because that's not their role, it's not their job if they're managers. And the other is because if we were to try and make an army of trained listeners, there's going to be a lot of people more ill and a lot of people die before we manage to get the army of trained listeners through, because it's going to take at least 4 years, maybe longer, to train up a counsellor. It's going to take thousands of pounds. It's even worse if you're going to try and train up a psychiatrist. It's even more years and more money, so that's not going to help. So the trained listener, the trained bit, this is what I used to train people. Sure, there are some skills that are really helpful, okay? But the ones that are even more helpful are training people what not to do. So the first thing is do no harm. Do not tell people, choose happiness when you're talking to a depressed person, when you're talking to an unhappy person. Why? Why not tell them to choose happiness? Because you make them feel worse. They feel guilty, they feel bad, they do not know what to do, and they feel like they're from planet Zor. If we have trained listeners, we will create an army of skillful helpers. But they don't, as I said, they don't need to pay thousands of pounds for their training, and we don't need to wait 5 years. The last thing that I want to say is this is my mantra. I've had mental health problems in my life, on and off, my whole life. That's why I said #MeToo. So I've been lucky. Every time I see somebody suffering, and I'm lucky enough for it to be today, I'm not the suffering one. I go, there but for the grace of God go I. And in all humility, I ask you please to think about that as I do with Sharon. Thank you very much.